We're going to go to the other big TV story this morning. One of the most volatile stars of cable news is off the air. In a breakup that had been brewing for months but came as a surprise to many viewers, Keith Olbermann and MSNBC have parted ways. Olbermann broke the news Friday night, announcing that he'd been told it would be his final broadcast for MSNBC.
There were many occasions, particularly in the last 2.5 years, where all that surrounded the show, but never the show itself, was just too much for me. But your support and loyalty, and if I may use the word insistence, ultimately required that I keep going. This may be the only television program wherein the host was much more in awe of the audience than vice versa.
And for more on this, we're joined by Howard Kurtz. He's the Washington bureau chief for the Daily Beast and host of CNN's Reliable Sources. And Howie, I know you've been working on this all weekend, both sides being very, very careful, calling this a negotiated separation. But was this more like Keith Olbermann getting fired or quitting?
Well, a combination, I guess, George. It was a divorce that seemed inevitable a couple of months ago when you had that incident where NBC suspended Olbermann for making donations to Democratic candidates. And you had this remarkable tableau where he was threatening to go public with his grievances. In fact, on Good Morning America and other shows, MSNBC President Phil Griffin threatening to fire Olbermann if he did that. Relations deteriorated from there. And
how much of this on the NBC side was they had to clear the decks before Comcast, that big cable company which is set to take over NBC, came in and took control?
Well, everyone knew the Comcast takeover was looming. Comcast, a much more corporate, button-down culture that probably was not going to indulge some of Keith Olbermann's more incendiary moments. But what happened here, if you pulled back the camera just a little bit, is a very talented broadcaster who in recent years had become more partisan, more inflammatory, just plain angry, even in the opinion of some of his friends and those sympathetic to him. And that, of course, thrilled his fans on the left who loved to see him go after Fox News and George Bush and Republicans, but it made him increasingly difficult to deal with for management, which asked him to tone it down and on some occasions to rein it in just a little bit, and relations really just got poisoned.
Yeah, you have a great phrase in your piece this morning in the Daily Beast saying it tells a great story about the limits of anger. But you know, MSNBC really built their nighttime lineup around Keith Olbermann. He really built the whole brand. What happens to them now?
Well, MSNBC, fortunately for that network, has other liberal hosts who've developed a following. Rachel Maddow, Ed Schultz, Lawrence O'Donnell was just hired as a host. But Olbermann really paved the way for all of them. I would say he almost single-handedly revived that network. But at the same time, then he would do things like a year ago, go on the air and call Massachusetts Senator Scott Brown a homophobic, racist teabagger. He apologized for that. So those incidents tended to overshadow, the very smart commentary that he would do. And it just became a question of, anger can be very useful, but there comes a point where maybe you are consumed by your own anger and almost become a caricature. And so I do think that it was going to be impossible, Comcast or no Comcast, for this marriage to continue.
And how about Olbermann? He's going to have to stay off the news, television news, for some time. But can he thrive without the platform and promotion that MSNBC gave him?
Well, it's a great platform, but when he had that suspension, 300,000 people signed an online petition asking him to stay on the air. That's a pretty good base, and I wouldn't be surprised if he starts an internet channel or something like that. In other words, he has a lot of fans that he can bring with him, and so I think it's very safe to predict we have not heard the last of Keith Olbermann.
Okay, Howie Kurtz, thanks very much.